Well, things just keep getting more intense with the Daily Wire. I really don't understand why Ben Shapiro is continuing to go on this apologia tour where he's going on Piers Morgan, Megyn Kelly, and many other shows to proclaim to the world that the Daily Wire did, in fact, not fire Candace Owens over her opinions, over saying Christ is king, for her criticisms of foreign policy in particular and how it relates to Israel.
So, Jeremy, I hope you're being sarcastic there when you don't understand why Ben Shapiro is doing this. It's obvious why Ben Shapiro is doing this. The reason why Ben Shapiro is doing this is because he personally and the Daily Wire look awful. It is genuinely awful. Not only do you have Ben Shapiro's comments on the Joe Rogan experience about him disrespecting and blaspheming Jesus Christ, not only are there posts online about Ben Shapiro saying, hands up, don't nail as it relates to Jesus, not only are there posts that are emerging about Ben Shapiro being a smug, arrogant pile of garbage, but you have the behind the scenes of the Daily Wire being leaked where there was a, brainstorming session where basically they got a bunch of employees, brought them in, and Andrew Klavan tried to do some kind of hit piece on Candace Owens from the internals of the Daily Wire, trying to create these ridiculous, oh, she's anti-Semitic because she says Christ is king. We have seen this over and over and over again. Jeremy Boring's responses have been absolutely dreadful. There has been almost nothing from Matt Walsh and nothing from Michael Knowles. So, across the board, their PR, their optics look terrible. Ben Shapiro is going and doing damage control on any friendly media outlet that he possibly can. Notice he's going on Dave Rubin. Notice he's going on Megyn Kelly. Notice he's going on Piers Morgan. He knows he's not really going to get much pushback from any of these shows. You know that he's not going to do an interview with, like, Tim Pool. You know he's not going to do an interview with anyone that isn't on the pre-approved neocon checklist where he's going to be able to get out his talking points and not really have any pushback. That is why he is doing this. It is apparent to anyone paying attention. So when you come on here, Jeremy, and you say, oh, I don't know why they're doing it. Yes, you do know why. And we all know why. There's no confusion here. None at all. Ben Shapiro is attempting to do damage control because, well, he looks terrible. And there's been nothing from the Daily Wire that has actually countered any of the information that's come out. They've simply said, well, we're not going to talk about it while talking about it.
I'm starting to get the methinks doth protest too much vibe from all of this. Then Candace Owens seems to have had enough. And she said, okay, well, now I'm going to speak because Ben Shapiro keeps going out there. They had clearly signed some sort of non-disparagement, or NDA or some sort of thing like that. And it looks like Candace Owens is getting pretty pissed off that Ben keeps going out there. Now, again, I will say, as I always do, I don't know what happened behind the scenes.
Oh, come on, Jeremy. Oh my God, Jeremy. Part of me really likes you. Part of me really likes. Well, let me be clear. I don't like you, Jeremy. I don't like the quartering. I like Jeremy Hambley. I like the guy that gets drunk and lets loose and has a good time and is authentic. The guy who shitposts on Twitter and says things that makes people mad. I hate the quartering. You're just, oh, I don't want to say anything. Dude, we know why. There's no ambiguity here. We're not confused about this. I understand. You want to err on the side of caution. You want to be like, okay, well, I'm a big channel. I don't want to alienate the Daily Wire. I get that. But from my point of view, from my perspective, where I don't care about any of that. I'm saying it's obvious. It's obvious why she was fired. It's obvious. There is no ambiguity. There's no confusion. It's because she said Christ is king, and Ben Shapiro took that personally. Andrew Klavan very much took that personally. And also, if you want to know why she was fired, it wasn't for Christ is king one-on-one. But it was part of it, because according to the leaks that we saw from the town hall that we know actually happened at the Daily Wire, that Andrew Klavan, who has all but admitted this, by the way, got clips of Nick Fuentes and clips of Candace Owens saying Christ is king, and played him back and forth and said, look here, there you go, there's your evidence. Do you know how I know this? Because a number of people from the Daily Wire have come forward. Now you could say, well, we don't know that for sure. Well, it's pretty much been clear. Andrew Klavan has essentially said that publicly. It's not a secret. He's actually said it. So we know why they were fired, but why she was fired. It was because she talked about the women and children in Gaza who are unfortunately losing their lives at record numbers. That's why she was fired. Because she was talking about Palestine in a light that was uncomfortable for Ben here and uncomfortable for Klavan. It had nothing to do with foreign policy and, Matt Walsh, he talks about, I don't think the U.S. should be giving money to Israel. No, it had nothing to do with that. It had to do with the fact that she was critical of what Israel was doing. Simply because she didn't like what happened on October 7th. She condemned it utterly. But she also said, I also condemn the fact that you have young people and women that are losing their lives in record numbers. So that's the majority of why she was arrested. Why she was removed from the Daily Wire. And all of this is obvious, which is why Ben Shapiro is doing this. If it was really confused, they wouldn't say a word about it.
There's very valid arguments that Candace Owens leaving Daily Wire was right around the 3-year mark, which could have been the length of her contract. There are valid arguments that maybe she saw how much they offered to pay Steven Crowder and thought she was worth more. And it seems like she started acting up ever since going to bat for the Daily Wire against Steven Crowder. I don't know. We don't know. Candace hasn't said. And to be totally frank, it's none of our business, really, unless you're a paid subscriber at Daily Wire.
I don't even know what to make of that segment. That was just a whole bunch of nonsense and gobbledygook. That was just blowing it out your ass. Oh, well, we don't really know. It could be her contract was expired. Gotta remember. Jeremy. I know you're not retarded. And I know that you may appear very, very stupid in this last segment. Jeremy Boring admitted on the Twitter Spaces that he fired her. I don't know what this is. Why are you running damage control for the Daily Wire? Oh, it could have been a pay dispute. Jeremy Boring said he fired her. That was on the Twitter Spaces. Did you miss that? I mean, there were clips of that going around. I thought that was common knowledge. Why are you rehashing things that have already been settled? Like, and it's really none of your business. No, absolutely, it is every bit my fucking business. Because if somebody on my side, or supposedly my side, of the political aisle is out there pushing things and promoting things that are anti what they claim to stand for, then you bet your ass that every person has a right to speak up. What type of waffling, pussified, low IQ garbage are you peddling here? You know better than that. Oh, no one really has a right unless they're a subscriber? What the fuck? Who knows why she left? Jeremy Boring admitted that he fired her. She was fired. She wasn't let go. It wasn't a amicable, it was an amicable leaving. Jeremy, come on. What the hell?
If you're a paid subscriber to the Daily Wire, you might want to know. But Ben went on Megyn Kelly. Now, again, last week he went on Piers Morgan and refused to answer the question. Okay. Now he goes on Megyn Kelly and has this. Now, look, he may have had these scheduled ahead of time, all that kind of stuff. By the way, if you're enjoying this show, please always leave a like.
God, Jeremy, listen, here's some criticism. You're obviously way more successful than me, but here's the deal. The way that you have to qualify everything before you speak is really pussified and embarrassing. It's really goddamn embarrassing. Why would you have to qualify? Well, maybe he had. No, of course he didn't have these scheduled. Of course he didn't have these scheduled. This is a media tour. It's a media tour for one purpose. Because Ben Shapiro was humiliated. Because Ben Shapiro looks like a goddamn villain. The Daily Wire looks very, very bad. So his thing is to go and do damage control because that's what you do when your company is burning. Now, I don't know what the subscriber loss to the Daily Wire is, but I see what people are saying online about Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire, and it's not good. It is not good. Now, am I saying that they're going to go up in flames and be done? No, of course not. They'll recover. They'll bounce back. But right now, they're in damage control mode, and you know that, and I know that. So why are you insulting both of our intelligence by trying to justify, well, it could be. No, of course it's not. Maybe he had one scheduled with, Dave Rubin. But you mean to tell me he had a show about, Piers Morgan and Dave Rubin and Megyn Kelly and all these other places? No. And it's not just him. Andrew Klavan is going on a PR tour. And Jeremy Boring is jumping on the Twitter Spaces and trying to defend the Daily Wire. So, no, it's an all-hands-on-deck media PR tour, Jeremy. My God. Dude, I do like you, Jeremy. I don't like the quartering. I don't like this character you play, but I do like you, Jeremy. I do like when you get drunk and you like shitpost and you're fun and you're funny and you go scorched earth on people. I love that. I think that's absolutely great. And it's taken me some time to realize that the quartering and Jeremy Hambley are not the same person. This is like a sensitized, weird, inversion. And I got to tell you, I don't like it. I don't like the qualifying statements before everything. You can just say something. You can just say something and say it with your full chest.
Like on the video. If you haven't yet, subscribe or follow down below. It means a lot to me. It helps a ton. And remember, I have a live show every weekday at 5:30 Eastern on Rumble, or I also have Quartercast on YouTube, which are always linked in the pinned comment and the description these days. I'd love for you to join. It's a completely different show. Tuesdays and Thursdays, I have Melanie Mack. Wednesdays, I have Styx Hexenhammer every week now, so I'd love for you to tune in. Now, let's look at this.
Into a debate about whether the Daily Wire is pro-free speech. The accusation is you are until it comes to Israel. How do you respond?
We have a wide variety of positions on Israel right now inside the Daily Wire. Matt Walsh, obviously, is another one of the hosts at the Daily Wire. He and I wildly disagree about what America's Israel policy should be. Matt is much more isolationist. He basically believes the United States has no real interests in the Middle East.
By the way, big agree. I've had my disagreements with Matt Walsh before, about video games or whatever the case may be. Big agree with Matt Walsh about, hey, until all of our problems are fixed here in America, let's not meddle in foreign policy. I think even if you are someone who doesn't live in America that watches my videos, you probably feel the same about your own country, right? I can't think of a single country that couldn't use a little more TLC, whether it's, with homeless problems or, public works or bridges or roads or, there's a million things that could be fixed. I don't think any country is perfect, so maybe we shouldn't be, intervening in these other countries. But anyway, he's referring to, Matt Walsh put out a video, I think a day or two ago, where he basically directly disagreed with Jeremy Boring and Ben Shapiro's opinion that really any criticism of Israel is anti-Semitic, which is absurd.
And thus, the United States should not be providing material support to anyone, including the state of Israel. The Daily Wire is a publisher, not a platform. I would never call for anyone to be ousted from an actual platform, X, YouTube. Even people who are, I think, absolutely horrific human beings, I've never called for any of them to be ousted. In fact, I've called for them to have their accounts restored if they've been banned.
So let me be clear what Ben Shapiro is saying here. He's talking about we are a publisher, not a platform. Where have you heard this language before? Well, with Section 230, right? Where the government protects platforms from legal repercussions based on the actions of users who publish things on a platform. If I upload something heinous to Facebook, Facebook can't get sued. Same with X, YouTube, and whatever. Now we know that basically all these platforms outside of perhaps Rumble, have you followed me on Rumble yet? I hope that you do. They don't act really like platforms. They act like publishers, meaning they boost and deboost opinions they disagree with or they agree with. They carry water for the Democrats, like on YouTube and Twitter used to, Instagram, Facebook. Basically, every major Silicon Valley website promotes Democratic content, pro-Democrat content, shadow bans, anything else. He's saying, look, the Daily Wire, we tell people what to say, right? We tell people what is acceptable to be said at our outlet because we are a publisher, not a platform. The Daily Wire is not YouTube. We have rules, is what he's saying. And that's entirely fine. It's as critical.
It's not fine. And I'll explain. While in theory, technically, it is fine. The reality is that the Daily Wire didn't build themselves as such. The way that they promoted themselves is that they were a bastion of free speech. That while there may have been a certain conservative, baseline, that they were just like any other network. On Fox News, you had Hannity and Combs. Combs was left wing, Hannity was right wing. The way that the Daily Wire was presented, at least initially, was that it was a place where you could have differing ideas. And that we could disagree and we could come together to have a conversation. Now, if the Daily Wire were intelligent, they wouldn't have fired Candace Owens. What they would have done is boost their profile by several thousand degrees by having an official debate that you could only see at the Daily Wire between Candace Owens and Ben Shapiro. A debate on the topic of Israel where they had, a time to make their point and they had like a conversation like adults. Instead, Ben is throwing a temper tantrum and him and Andrew Klavan and Jeremy Boring got her fired over her opinions that they deemed unacceptable, which they're not unacceptable opinions. Not by any reasonable metric. Now, whether you agree or disagree with her doesn't matter. There's nothing that she said that is in any way offensive or radical.
As I've been, I think that's a fine rule to say. Like, hey, you can say whatever you want on your own platform, but when you're publishing videos for the Daily Wire, if you say something heinous or that hurts the company, we have something to say about that. Now, I think people's valid criticism of that is, why is it only about this one topic, right? This one topic you're not allowed to, push up against.
That's not the same thing when it comes to publishers. Publishers obviously have to decide what sort of things they wish to pay for the publication of. And when it comes to, hosts and publishers, parting ways, obviously there'll be a non-meeting of the minds. That's pretty much all I can say on that.
Again, most of what he's saying is fine. I think, as a, I don't pay anybody to, well, I guess the Publica, we do have, have you been to thepublica.com, by the way? Great news team that Sydney Watson and I run. Generally, again, from a business perspective, I don't disagree with him. I think what people are pointing out is, why is it just this one thing? And what I'm curious of, why are you on Megyn Kelly, Piers Morgan, Glenn Greenwald? 3 different shows in 3 days, all like running damage control.
Actually 4. Dave Rubin.
I assume that Daily Wire is losing subscribers. I assume. And now, so he goes on Glenn Greenwald's The System Update. These people, if I'm being totally honest, they make me sick. They cannot think in any form of principles whatsoever. Glenn Greenwald eviscerates Ben Shapiro's impressively hypocritical justification for real Candace Owens' Daily Wire departure.
But here's the real meat of the matter when Ben Shapiro tries to explain what line it is that Candace Owens crossed.
And so when it comes
I'm sorry, I misspoke. This is Glenn Greenwald commentating on Ben Shapiro's appearance on, I forgot, another show, The Rubin Report, where he went to run interference as well.
to the host on the Daily Wire, obviously everyone is able to say what they want. Nobody ever comes to me and says you can't say X because, again, there's a parting of the...
We know this.
One of the biggest media controversies in the last 5 years was that the New York Times had published an op-ed by Tom Cotton during the Black Lives Matter movement in which Tom Cotton advocated that the U.S. military should be deployed onto the streets of the United States to crush the Black Lives Matter movement on the grounds that that movement had become systemically violent.
It did.
And many, many journalists inside the New York Times said that is outside of our Overton window, as Ben Shapiro put it. Overton window. Ben Shapiro is really not using that phrase correctly. The Overton window really is a theory that says you want to create as broad of a range of political views as possible. You want to widen the Overton window if you're a radical so that views that have been deemed way far outside of the mainstream get closer and closer to the mainstream. Ben Shapiro, when he says Overton window, is saying there's a range of views
we're willing to pay for
that I may not agree with, but these are the acceptable views.
Correct.
Within our media outlet. And you can't cross the line here and you can't cross the line here because then you're outside of the Overton window. And he's saying we as a media outlet have every right to set the boundaries of what we consider to be acceptable views. And if you go outside of those boundaries, we have the right to fire you, and free speech is not implicated by that. Okay, so if that's the case, why was there so much uproar when the New York Times decided to fire 2 of its editors for publishing Tom Cotton's op-ed that called for the deployment of American military to quell the Black Lives Matter movement? The New York Times editors were simply saying what Ben Shapiro was saying. We have an Overton window, and that op-ed was outside of our Overton window. We don't want to be associated with views that call for the U.S. military to crush a social justice movement against racism. That was their perspective, and we don't want to be associated with that view. We're not saying these editors should be put in prison. We're not saying Tom Cotton should be put in prison for that view. We just don't want to host this view. We don't want to subsidize editors who would publish this sort of thing. I don't know a single person on the right who defended the New York Times there. Just like I don't know of a single person on the right who defended NBC News from getting rid of Ronna McDaniel. It was presented as a kind of crisis in free discourse.
Me. I laughed my ass off when Ronna McDaniels got fired from MSNBC. Holy crap! She's such a neocon, rhino, Romney type Republican. No, I got to admit, I actually laughed. I laughed a great deal because why the hell would you go and get a job on MSNBC? That's ridiculous.
Discourse that within major media outlets, you cannot express certain political views that are within the mainstream without getting fired. And yet here is Ben Shapiro trying to justify why Candace Owens is gone from the Daily Wire, not because of a business reason.
Right.
Outside of Ben Shapiro, Candace Owens is the biggest name at the Daily Wire. She has the biggest audience.
Guaranteed. Yeah.
They're probably comparable in terms of the number of people who watch their show, who listen to their podcast. Maybe Ben Shapiro's bigger.
He is a little bit.
But Candace Owens is in that same category. There's nobody else at the Daily Wire who competes with Candace Owens. I guess Justin Peterson if you want, but it's the point I'm making is that Candace Owens is a huge
Jordan Peterson's
draw. Yeah. It's not for that business reason. But what is true is that the Daily Wire was started with investment from a right-wing billionaire, millions of dollars.
Yes.
A pro-Israel billionaire.
Yes.
And
keep going.
Ben Shapiro is essentially saying that we have limits on what you can say about Israel, and Candace Owens went outside of them. Now, if you're comfortable with that and you think that's fine to fire journalists because they express political views outside of some line, then how can you criticize NBC News for doing the same with Ronna McDaniel or the New York Times for doing the same when deciding they don't want any Trump supporters there?
I'll leave it there. You should watch Glenn's entire video on it if you want, a better take. But that I think is a very, very fair position to have. And then, of course, here we go. Candace Owens sees it and says, Ben, we agreed not to talk about this, but you are very much going on a public tour right now, pretending not to talk about it. While you are very much talking about it, would you like me to do the same? I 100% agree with Candace Owens, and I'm not a big Candace Owens fan. And you can see I just canceled. You see this? I just canceled my all access. I think, why is he continuing to go out on this tour? Now, people are pointing out, hey, you went on Tucker Carlson and talked about it, which is also fair. But that was before she was fired. So it'll be interesting to see, how many more.
I like how in the back half, I don't know, maybe Jeremy knows more than I do. Because in the first half of the video, Jeremy's demeanor and the way that he qualifies things is very different than in the back half, where he's showing a little bit of the true Jeremy Hambley, a little bit of the based Hambley. That's the Jeremy I like, who's incredibly based. But yeah, it's abundantly clear that Ben Shapiro and the Daily Wire fired Candace Owens because she said something that she shouldn't have, which is not really anything that she shouldn't have. Whether you agree with it or not. There was nothing that she said that was all that... there was nothing that she said that was radical at all. She's basically like, yeah, I don't like what Hamas did. It was evil. She called it evil. But she also said, I don't like what Israel is doing. I don't like the fact that you have all these people that are dead. I think that's a perfectly reasonable thing, because a lot of these kids that are being killed had nothing to do with this. I think that's perfectly fair. That is a reasonable point of view. My point of view is I don't care either way. I don't. I'm an American first conservative. We have problems at home. We have big problems at home. We need to fix the problems at home. In entertainment, in the government. I mean, there are major things that we need to vote out and sort out. And so we have our own things that we should deal with. Why are we focusing on a conflict overseas? Anyway, that's my opinion on this, ladies and gentlemen. Go give the Quartering go give him a follow. Go give him a subscribe if you haven't. Not that it needs any encouragement from me. 1.57 million subscribers. He's definitely a bigger channel than I am. But that's a lot of hard work that went in to make that, by the way. So I'm not knocking Jeremy. I know he's a hard-working guy. But anyway, yeah, that'll do it for today's video, ladies and gentlemen. I wanted to get this off my chest and talk about this. I'm glad that there are so many people that are pushing back and being honest about this. And I guess the last thing that I will say to finish it off is Christ is King. Have a great night, ladies and gentlemen. Christ is King.